Okay, so welcome to Vote Yes on Proposition 2. My name is Elizabeth Benyi, and I am a volunteer with both the League of Women Voters Copper Country and with Voters Not Politicians, and they were partners with Promote the Vote 2022 to get this proposition onto the ballot. We gathered over 650,000 signatures, and after proper vetting, the Board of Canvassers approved it to be placed onto the ballot. So it's going to come onto the ballot. This is what we're showing first is the handout that people that are here live in the room will be getting. And I wanted to share it with the people on Zoom. You can either take a screenshot of it or take notes off of it. This is the back side. This is the actual proposal. This is the front side. These are the top items that are on Promote the Vote 2022. It's going to protect the fundamental right to vote and help ensure that elections are free from intimidation and interference, protects the ability of every eligible Michigander to vote regardless of their political party, and enhances the integrity of our elections. In other words, election security, which is a very big thing in today's world, making voting more convenient while keeping it secure, especially for working parents, military families, elderly voters, voters that are infirmed and can't get out to vote in person, rural voters who may have to drive long distances to go to a polling place. We actually want them to be able to have secure voting with the means of using absentee ballot. And we now have established in Michigan, you don't need an excuse or a voucher or a reason to have an absentee ballot. So everybody is entitled. It also helps guarantee that Michigan voters serving in the military will have their votes counted, ensures that all eligible voters will have equal access to postage to mail both their applications for absentee votes and to mail their ballots in, and secure drop boxes, standardized secure drop boxes across the board, and that there will be enough drop boxes, particularly in high population areas. Creates 9 days of early voting. This is one of the new things. Michigan's one of the few states in the country that does not have early voting. Now, what does early voting do? Early voting allows for people to get to the polls at their convenience. Michigan, unfortunately, is also one of the states where it's illegal to round up people in a van and take them to go vote. It's now a criminal offense. And we're the only state in the country where that is a punishable offense now. So elderly people and people with disabilities are now going to have to try to make some sort of an arrangement to be able to get to the polls if they want to go vote in person or even take their ballot to a drop box. So having 9 days of early voting also takes pressure off of clerks on voting day when they have to start counting the votes after being at the poll all day long. It takes some of that pressure off of them too. And it allows for workers, especially people who work odd shifts or swing shifts or different shifts. It gives them the opportunity to be able to go and cast their vote. It enhances the security of elections by guaranteeing that the elections are based on the votes of Michigan citizens and not what some capricious number that somebody wants to come up with. And it helps ensure that the identity of each voter is verified prior to them counting the vote, whether they're voting in person or by mail. Modernizes and updates the voting systems to ensure that every vote is counted. And more importantly, along with that, it enhances the ability for you to track your ballot. So if you decide to use absentee ballot as a way of voting, you will have an enhanced tracking system so that you can see that your ballot did arrive and that it is being counted. So that's the first side of the handout. The second side of the handout is this is the actual language that you will see on the ballot. It will be on the back side of your ballot, so don't forget to flip your ballot over. That's where your Supreme Court justices are going to be for the state of Michigan. Your county circuit judges will be back there. Your commissioners for your county and your local election, like if there's a local millage or something like that. But also the 3 proposals. This will be proposal 22-2, the year 22, and then the second proposal. So vote yes on proposal 2. We want, voters should be choosing their politicians and not the other way around. So this is the language that you will see on the back side of the ballot for proposal 2.
This doesn't do anything with gerrymandering. But that's
No,
kind of
this
more of a
started with gerrymandering, but
okay.
we still, instead of politicians determining the outcome of the elections, the voters will be deciding based on their vote and every vote being counted.
This is wonderful language. You guys did a great job, or whoever wrote this.
So now we're going to go on to the slide presentation that covers basically the handout that so this is vote yes for Prop 2. This will be for safe and secure elections, but also enhanced access to elections as well in addition. Next slide. So proposal 2 builds on the success of proposal 3 that was in 2018. This was also from Promote the Vote, which gave us no reason absentee voting, expanded the voter registration because we are now able to register to vote up onto the day of voting. I mean, you have to go in person if there's only so many days before the election, but you can register to vote on the day of the election as long as you have proper identification. And the right to have a secret ballot and straight party voting. Instead of having to check off every box, you can do straight party voting. That doesn't count for the back side of the ballot. So remember, flip your ballot over and go through those sections, because even though some of the judges may be partisan, they are not included in straight party voting because they're supposed to be blind justice, if you will. Right, nonpartisan. So next slide. So what is it? It's a ballot initiative. It's a ballot initiative that was a citizen-driven initiative, meaning that volunteers went out and gathered signatures for the ballot proposal on a petition drive. Got over 650,000 signatures. After the verification process, we had more than enough signatures that were required. It's going to be on the ballot for this November 8th, 2022. Some people are probably already getting absentee ballots. So it's probably, people are already casting their votes as we speak. And what would it do? It would amend the Michigan Constitution and add certain voting rights to the Michigan Constitution. Now, why is this important? Because if voters say that this should be part of our Constitution for the state of Michigan, this prevents the legislature from changing those rights. As you know, our voting rights have been under siege since 2016. And once you lose a right, it is very, very hard to get that right back again. And so who is doing it? It's a broad coalition of organizations. You can go to the website and see all the partners. League of Women Voters Michigan and League of Voters Copper Country are supporting members of this initiative, as well as Voters Not Politicians, the ACLU, Sierra Club. There's a number of large organizations that have partnered with this initiative. And so what is needed? We need to talk to our friends and family and our neighbors and community members about this proposal and why it would be important for them to consider voting yes. Next slide.
that it?
So, yeah, that's it. Why should you vote yes on proposal 2? Next slide. It recognizes the fundamental right to be able to vote without harassing conduct. So voters can vote being free from intimidation and interference. As we know, I don't know if you've been following in the news, but the Michigan Republican Party is actively telling their followers to harass people during the voting process, also during observation of votes they're even advocating for armed people to show up. There's just a news release today that there's a coalition of people that are going to show up to drop boxes armed. So we need to put a stop to this kind of violence and intimidation of voters. And regardless of what your party is, the color of your skin, what your gender is, whether you're, people should be allowed to cast their votes. Their ballots should be allowed to be cast in secret without intimidation and violence being threatened. And poll workers and clerks should not have to do their work under the threat of violence as well. We had a huge turnover of clerks since the last election, and we don't have the funding to get them trained. And so we need to ensure that we have our clerks protected so that they are not under threat, and we can train them and give them the job security and the skills necessary to run safe and secure elections. Next slide. This is a big one for me. I served in the military for 9 years as an officer. I took an oath to defend the Constitution and the right for citizens to be able to cast their votes. We should be able to have our military families and people serving overseas, even people who are serving American corporations overseas and having to vote while they're away from home. Their votes should be counted as long as they're postmarked by election day. Now, why is this important? In the 2018 election, 3,000 military votes from the state of Michigan were not counted because they arrived after election day, despite the fact that they had been postmarked before election day. 3,000 military votes. As someone who has served overseas, someone who has served far from home, the fact that if my vote wasn't counted while I was gone, it just is astounding to me. These people sacrifice everything to serve this country and to defend our Constitution and our rights, and their votes should count.
Why was the military not able to deliver this ballots?
It still has to go through a postal system, okay? So the military cannot control foreign postal systems, and they can't control the United States system.
The postal system was just chaotic then.
And it hasn't really gotten any better. So we need to make sure that they have their votes counted as long as they've been postmarked. Next slide. It also provides voters the right to verify their identity with a photo ID or a signed statement. Now, we already have this in place. This is the system that we have been using. It works very, very well. There has been, they did like over 26 verified audits from the 2020 election. They found less than 0.1% of fraud. And a vast majority of the fraud that was actually perpetrated were people who were breaking into voting machines or stealing voting machines out of precincts and trying to monkey with the tabulators. So it wasn't because of voter ID. What we have in place now, and we want to codify that as part of the state constitution, is you can present secure ID. Student ID is acceptable, your driver's license, a verified state ID, your passport, or you sign an affidavit swearing you are who you say you are. That sworn affidavit is a legal document, and it's prosecutable if you are lying. So we need to keep this in place because there are forces out there that want to change what we use for a voter ID law. They want to require using your social security number on your ballots. They want to require using your social security number on your applications for absentee ballot, and that you put your social security number on your absentee ballots as well.
Isn't it illegal to require a social, then social security be used as an ID number anyway?
Under federal law, but not under state law. That's the whole thing. And the legislature could make that as a requirement unless we codify this into the Constitution. Now, it's even a little bit more insidious than that. If they used outside auditors, private companies to audit elections or gather election data, now those outside companies have your social security number
Yeah, I'm sure there's
with no
problem with
oversight.
that.
And yeah, with absolutely no oversight. So because that's basically kind of what happened with the cyber ninjas in Arizona. They collected all of that voter data and then stored it in a remote area up in Montana, and nobody knows what's being done with that data. So we just don't want that happening in the state of Michigan. Next slide. So, and it also allows voters to request absentee ballot by mail for all future elections. In other words, if you want to be on the permanent list for absentee ballot, based on, just know that this suits you for your lifestyle, whether because you're either elderly or you live rural or you work a crazy job or who knows what we don't need a reason anymore. What we currently have in place is you have to actually fill out an application for every absentee ballot, even if you are on the permanent list. And that can be cumbersome, both to the Postal Service and to the individual who wants to make sure that they get an absentee ballot. And it's also cumbersome to the clerk because they've got to get those applications sent out every single time. What you can do now is do one application and say for every future election, as long as you notify that you've moved, and you'd have to establish that with your new local clerk anyway. You do one application for absentee ballots, and then you don't have to do an application for every single election. Next slide. It required to require secure drop boxes and robust absentee ballot tracking. Now, we need standardization of drop boxes because everybody was kind of left to their own devices as to what they were going to do, particularly in rural Michigan, because they didn't have access to being able to get the hardware for secure drop boxes. So that there were a few instances in which maybe it wasn't quite as secure as it should have been. However, it did not seem to impact the election, and it did not impact any voter fraud. There wasn't any ballot harvesting going on or weird situation. But to ensure that the people who are most worried about secure voting, we have to have standardized secure drop boxes. And then why robust absentee ballot tracking? Because you should be able to track your ballot and make sure that it gets counted. That's the only way to make sure that somebody is not monkeying with your absentee ballots, to be able to track it online, have it registered through the Secretary of State's office that it's been received, that it's been counted, and that it's in the system. Next slide. And it will require that election audits be conducted in public by state and county election officials, not by outside groups like cyber ninjas, based on established guidelines to promote accuracy and transparency. Nobody knew what was going on with that vote counting. And like I said, they took all that voter data and stored it up in a facility up in Montana, and nobody knows what's being done with it. So that every audits will be done in public by election officials for accuracy and transparency. Next slide. So this is the big new one. 9 days of early in-person voting. The state of Michigan is one of the few states that does not have early voting. Again, early voting allows a lot more flexibility, particularly for working people who work odd shifts, different shifts, or swing shifts. It gives them the opportunity to get to, if they want to cast their vote in person, it gives you the opportunity to cast your vote in person. It also avoids long lines at polling places, particularly in high population areas. So that clerks don't have to, you know, if you're in line before 8 o'clock, they still have to allow you to vote, even if you're still standing in line by 11 p.m. And then those election officials have to start counting the votes and get the results out. What this does is this takes a lot of the strain off of those clerks, especially with a large amount of polling places being closed. Next slide. So this is a big part of election security too, and making sure that voters are in control of votes and who is being voted for. It requires that canvassing boards certify election results based only on the official records of votes cast. That means whoever won the election based on what the voters voted for, the canvassing board certifies those elections, not any other entity, not the legislators themselves, not some outside agent, but the canvassing boards, and it's only based on the votes that were cast. So how can you support Prop 2? Well, you could volunteer. I'm not going to ask you to volunteer. You could make a donation. I'm not going to ask you to make a donation. That's strictly up to you. You can become a partner. So if you own a company or a group and you want to lend support and give them your endorsement, you can do that. You can share our posts. That is a big thing. So if you see anything online and you want to share it widely with in your social media. And this is my big ask. This is what I am going to ask you to do, though. Encourage others to support. I'm going to ask you to do what's called the power of 3. So talk to 3 of your friends or 3 of your family members about why they should vote yes on proposal 2, and ask them to ask 3 people. So the power of 3, get the word out. That's the only ask that I have of you. And we can really do a lot just by doing that. Next slide. So if I'm going to take any questions, if there are questions on Proposition 2, these are the links on all the social media platforms for Promote the Vote. So if you wanted to see the official language of the ballot proposal, because it's quite lengthy, I think it's over 500 words. That's not what you'll see on the ballot, but if you wanted to see every single detail, because there are more details in it, especially things like, you know, making sure that clerks get training, making sure that people who are observers get basic training about appropriate behavior for how to be an observer. It also talks about funding for elections, so that if you want to donate space for polling place, if you wanted to donate money to help pay for postage, you know, for absentee ballots, if you wanted to donate lunches for the clerks and the poll workers so that you're sure that they're getting fed, you're allowed to do that, but it has to be disclosed. And we just want that. We want people to be able to support the election process as much as possible, but it has to be open and transparent. So there is a little bit more meat to the bone, but what you see on the handout are the big basics. Next slide. And if you wanted more education on all of the ballot proposals, Michigan State University is going to be doing a webinar in partner with the Citizens Research Council, October 12th at 7 p.m. and October 19th at 12 p.m. And you can register at the webinar on this particular website. So it will go through Prop 1, which is term limits and transparency. In other words, if you hold elected office, you have to disclose your financials. in order to get on the ballot in the state of Michigan. And term limits, it changes things around so that if you wanted to serve in one house of this, in the state of Michigan, you could do all 12 years in one spot, or you could divide it up between the two. What it hopefully does is it keeps the, it prevents the revolving door. You serve so many years in the House, and then you automatically get so many years in the Senate. That the term limits keep you at 12 years period, whether you do it in one or both. So that's ballot proposal 1. Ballot proposal 2, of course, is the one we just talked about. And then ballot proposal 3 is reproductive freedom. But if you wanted to learn more about the pros and cons and more detail on all 3 proposals, Michigan State is going to be doing a webinar on that. So I just added that as just a little bit FYI. So do we have any questions?
Should we stop the recording here?
We can stop the
And then
recording
We'll
at
take
this
some
time, and then we'll take
questions.
questions.
Okay, just a second here. Hold on. Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth.
And I would like to-
Oh, they have them on Voters Not Politicians website. So just bnp.com, and they have a little store there, and you can buy a t-shirt.
Okay.